If you're looking for a hot hatch that can be used as your daily driver, it doesn't get much better than a Volkswagen GTI. I mean, this vehicle started this segment nearly 40 years ago here in America when it first came to the market in 1983. Now, of course, a new generation GTI is coming, and for 2022, you can see this is now known as the Mark 8 generation. This is the 8th gen of the GTI, a vehicle that has gathered a lot of enthusiasts here in the States. So today I'm here at the M1 Concourse just outside of Detroit, Michigan with Volkswagen to take this vehicle out on the track. I'm going to drive a manual model, I'm going to drive a DSG, and I'm also going to get behind the wheel of a Mark 7 GTI. And we're going to find out, has Volkswagen made this latest GTI even better versus the previous generation? Stay tuned to find out. Now, as you can see from the state of my hair, I've actually already gone out on the track, but I want to first show you guys a walk around of the car so you can see some of the styling changes that Volkswagen has made for this new generation. As you guys know, VW tends to be a little conservative with making changes. It's always kind of an evolutionary change as opposed to a revolutionary one. Now, this one here in pure white is the classic GTI color. Now, this is my first time seeing the GTI in person. I've already driven the Golf R on an ICE track where I haven't driven the US model yet. This is also a European spec car, which means there are going to be slight differences to this vehicle that the US model may not get. Let me first start, of course, with the front fascia. We are not getting a regular Golf here, so if you guys want a Golf, you have to get a GTI or a Golf R. Everybody just wants SUVs now, but the hot hatch segment is still a very enticing market. You can see the headlights have been completely redesigned. They're a little bit more skinny. They're a little bit more sleek. Full LEDs are standard. This one here has their IQ light technology, which means it has kind of like the adaptive laser light headlight design, which you don't technically get here in the States because they are not street legal. The new running light has kind of a different signature where it looks a little bit cleaner. I like the way it looks. You also have an LED turn signal, and there's this new LED light bar that connects the two headlights together that kind of intersect where the new Volkswagen emblem is. You can see the emblem is the new slimmer design. This is where it houses the radar sensors for the adaptive cruise. And a big controversy with this generation are those fog lights. These fog lights are 5 individual LEDs that are kind of integrated into the lower front splitter. I think they look interesting in person. In pictures, I didn't really like it, but it definitely gives this car a distinctive look. And this pure white with the red accents, this is very GTI. I also love the European plate at the front. It just gives this car a really understated, classy appearance that you don't find in some of the competitors where they tend to be a little bit more outlandish, a little bit more boyish. Now, looking at the tires, Volkswagen has completely upgraded them for the new generation. They're 10 millimeters wider, so they're 235 width, 35 R19s. These are also Bridgestone Potenza RE71Rs. These tires are really great for the track and for autocross. You can see the brakes are the same upgraded twin piston red painted calipers that you get on the previous generation. Volkswagen did address the brake pedal feel, and they made it a little bit better this year with a new master cylinder, and we'll talk about that, of course, later on the track. The brakes are very impressive. In terms of the dimensions, Volkswagen didn't change the size. This is still around 168 inches long. It is smaller than something like a Honda Civic hatchback, but not quite as big, or not quite as small as the Hyundai Veloster, which is a little bit smaller versus this vehicle. You can see the roof panel on this one doesn't have the pano roof. It just has the standard roof. You can get it with that feature if you guys prefer that. And then looking at the vehicle's proportions from this angle, you can see it is a really classy and just understated car. It almost doesn't look completely new when you look at it from this angle. You really have to stare at the lights because the silhouette is practically the same. You can see full LED taillights with sequential turn signals. There's a nice little GTI badge right under the Volkswagen emblem, and you can see the exhaust looks exactly the same. You have those big twin pipes. VW says that they tweak the sound to make it sound a little bit nicer. Let me fire it up and so you guys can hear how it sounds. And definitely not as mean as the Golf R, but still a really nice noise. VW has been working hard on that. Now, opening up the trunk capacity, you can see this is still accessed by flipping that up. I don't have final cargo capacity figures just yet. The old one was right around 25 cubic feet. Fold this down, you got around 46. This looks practically identical. Remember, this has always been a practical hot hatch, but keep in mind, this segment in general isn't quite as popular anymore because everybody seems to be going to those sports SUVs, which offer more space, more ground clearance, and similar performance. So now let's move on to the interior of the 2022 GTI. Now, speaking of which, this one here, like I said, is a European spec model, which means it has some options that you can't technically pair with an American spec car. For example, this car has the dynamic chassis control, and it also has the plaid seats without the sunroof. In America, VW will typically pair that with the Titan black leather, and you'll also get a pano roof. So this one here is a European spec car, so I wanted to, point out the differences there. The rest of this interior is pretty standard GTI stuff. However, Volkswagen has really upgraded the tech in this vehicle, which is what it needed versus the old model. And as you can see, looking at the interior at a glance, just like a lot of other modern VWs that I've shown you, you have two massive digital displays, a 10.25 inch display here and a 10-inch display here. That's part of Volkswagen's next generation infotainment system. The door panel you can see looks pretty similar. You have an aluminum accented door handle, some nice soft touch plastic materials, some of the plaid material on the door panel here. It's even lined with some carpeted material here in the door pocket, which is nice. It'll help keep the rattling to a minimum. When I shut the door has a nice solid sounding thunk. This is just an updated MQB platform, which is already a great platform to start with. Now here's the key fob for the vehicle. It's pretty similar to the key that I showed you in the ID4. Nice looking key fob. The button to fire up the engine is right here by the shifter. And you can see the engine fires right up, and it has a nice growl to it. Pretty low rev limiter, but I'll be curious to see if VW gets rid of that for the US spec cars. But like I said earlier, the interior tech has been really upgraded in this vehicle, starting of course with the digital cockpit right here. You couldn't get this on the previous Mark 7. It was available on the Golf R, but now VW has put it on the Mark 8, and most of the trims I believe will have that. You can also customize the look of this if you'd like. You can see here I can push this little view button on the steering wheel, and that'll change the gauge display to a traditional look. You can also put the GPS in there. You can just put your driver assistance stuff in there, or just your speed massively right in the center. Or I like this one. This is kind of like the sport display with the tack front and center. That's a really good graphic when you guys are taking this vehicle out on the track. The steering wheel you can see is tilt and telescoping. It's got a flat bottom, which is nice. It's got the new Volkswagen emblem. It's got some red accents here on the lower part. The horn sounds really meaty actually, which is nice. Because the horn that I tested on the Volkswagen Taos sounded very puny. So that's a really nice addition that VW added. If you guys don't like piano black plastic, you're not going to like this new generation. You can see there's a lot of piano black plastic that shows fingerprints. Although it's resisted a little bit, it just shows dust. But this is definitely a much more modern look. One thing Volkswagen did get rid of are a lot of the old hard buttons and knobs. Instead, they've replaced it with a slider here, which I'm not the biggest fan of. Although it is relatively responsive. You can see the dual zone climate is right here on the screen. You can also just touch the screen. That'll bring up the climate if you guys want to actually reach that. You can see this system is a little bit slow at times, but I'm going to chalk it down to maybe this being an early pre-production model. This interface is very similar to the ID4, where you can change the background color if you'd like. You can also go to like this green, there's an individual, there's a yellow color, there's a blue, there's an orange. So it's pretty nice. You can also interchange the interior lighting in here. They offer like 30 different interior lighting color combinations, which is good. And VW is now offering heated and cooled seats in this car. So before you could get heated seats, now they do offer a cooled seat. This one does not have it. There's also a heated steering wheel, which is right here on the steering wheel. There's more touch sensitive controls, nice paddle shifters. In terms of the materials, this has always been where a GTI was strong. This upper portion here is a soft touch injection molded plastic. I do like the fact that you can get a head-up display as well. That is a new feature, which is nice. There's some plastic trim here that tries to look like a mixture of aluminum and carbon fiber, which is interesting. Down here, it's all kind of cheap, hard plastic, which I don't love. This reminds me a lot of the Volkswagen Jetta with this dash design. There's some shortcut buttons here for your climate, of course. For your stability control and for your drive mode selector. There's a nice wireless phone charging pad right here, which is a great place to put your phone, and it also has a cover on it so your phone doesn't slide around. More storage over here where you could put your keys, change, for example. There is a little shifter here, which is very Porsche-like. If I put the vehicle into reverse, you can see it gives you a backup camera with parking sensors. No 360 camera on this model. The one thing I didn't like is the parking button and the engine start button look practically the same. I found myself hitting that button a couple times when I was going for park, so I don't love that. Electronic parking brake now instead of the old e-brake handbrake that you got on the previous generation. Nice big center console storage area here for cup holders. Padded area right here. This also opens up. It's a pretty sturdy lid, and it still gives you the adjustments. It pulls forward and back, so this is very VW. The seats also really hold you in place nicely. I like the way they look as well. If you guys really like the plaid, this is what you're gonna want. On the track, I really noticed that these were hugging me, but they also weren't too constricting, which is nice. The glove compartment you can see is a pretty big, it's a bin style, it's damped but not lined with felt. The Harman Kardon stereo is really nice sounding. I'm not entirely sure if it's better versus the Fender premium branded audio system in the previous gen, but for those of you who like Harman Kardon, Volkswagen has decided to switch out with that system instead. You can see down here there are aluminum pedals, just like a lot of other VW products, and overall the cabin is full of a lot of the tech features. It feels roomy, it's easy to see in and out of in this vehicle, and really if you guys like your old GTI, you're gonna love this new one. Now in terms of the rear seat space, the GTI has always been a relatively practical family car. You can only get it with 4 doors because the 2-door model just doesn't sell very well here in the US. As you can see, looking at the back seat here, it's got the same plaid materials. I don't have final legroom figures. It looks like around 36 inches, which is pretty comparable to something like a Honda Civic. The door panel materials here are hard touch plastic. The fronts were soft touch, so you have some cost cutting there. When I get inside back here, you can see the space is pretty good actually at 5'7". And shutting the door, I do like how you have these map pockets here for your phone, or these little storage pockets for your phone. 2 map pockets down here. You have rear seat air vents, which is nice. Your own set of rear seat climate controls, which is also good. And there's 2 USB-C charging ports down there. So that's all very nice. The seat back itself has an armrest here that folds down. Your 2 cup holders right there. These still fold down in a 60/40 manner. And there's a bunch of touch sensitive LED lighting in here, which is definitely nice. It makes this cabin look a lot more expensive and a lot more premium. Now under the hood of the new GTI, you still have the familiar EA888 motor. This is the company's 2-liter turbocharged direct injection 4-cylinder. However, it has been upgraded this year with more power and more torque. And how much more power, you may be asking? Well, 13 more horsepower and 15 more pound-feet of torque versus the previous generation. So now we get 241 horsepower, 273 pound-feet of torque. That's all courtesy, of course, of a larger turbo that pumps in more boost, which is going to give us more power. This is practically similar numbers to what Audi puts in something like the A4 or the Q5, similar torque figures as well. All GTIs are still front-wheel drive. When you have your choice of either a 6-speed manual or a 7-speed dual clutch transmission. All of them come with the company's limited slip differential. They call it VAQ. It's an electronic limited slip differential, so it's not a mechanical one. And VW doesn't have final performance figures yet. The old GTI was always a 6-second-ish car, 0 to 60. So I'll test that out when I finally get my hands on an American spec car, not this European spec car. I don't have final fuel economy figures just yet. The old GTI was pretty good. It was like around 25 mpg combined, something like that. And weight, I actually read that this one is a little bit lighter versus the previous generation by around 30 pounds. As this one sits, it weighs in at around 3,154 pounds, which is pretty lightweight for the segment. Every modern car nowadays, as you guys know, is getting heavier from all the technology, all the luxury, and all the safety features. So it is really hard to believe that the Volkswagen GTI has been in America for nearly 40 years. And of course, this is the original hot hatch here in the States. I mean, every other manufacturer, VW, says they like to try to copy, but they can't. And now we're in this new Mark 8 GTI. This is a European spec model, but all of them are going to have the same 2-liter turbocharged 4-cylinder with 241 horsepower, 13 more ponies than the previous generation, 15 more pound-feet of torque. And I'm going out here at the M1 Concourse in Detroit. Never been to this track before, but this is just my first warm-up lap. I'm starting out in the dual clutch model. Nice noise. It makes a good sound. I like the sound. VW says they've really focused a lot on the chassis for this car. They wanted it to have better track times, more neutral handling, less understeer, better performance. And this 7-speed dual clutch basically gives you all of the same lovely qualities that we expect from Volkswagen from their dual clutch transmission. Now keep in mind, I have never driven this track, so I just did my first warm-up lap. We're coming up on the first lap here. And this will give me a chance to actually start to see what the handling dynamics are like with this car. And immediately I'm noticing the steering in this thing is really direct and fast. Surprisingly, it has good feedback too. And for a front-wheel drive car, very little understeer as well, although I'm not pushing it quite as hard because I'm still not quite used to this track. Floored here, let's feel that power. Still plenty of power for something in this segment. VW says they did not upgrade the brakes from the Mark 7 GTI. I can feel the front wheel drive pulling me around the corners. And I really like the noise. VW has really addressed the noise because the Mark 7 was just way too quiet. I'm wondering if any of this noise is being pumped in, but it sounds really good. I mean, for a stock car, this is pretty impressive. I have to admit, this is very impressive. The seats also hold you in place very nicely. I like how they have really comfortable bolsterings that still hug me, but they're not confining. There's a little bit of tire squealing there, but foot's hard to the floor. Strong brake pedal feel too. I like the brakes. They have a very nice bite to them. Floored here again. Come on. Very impressive. Got up to 100 miles an hour there on this straight. Very nice. You can feel the anti-lock brakes kicking in there. The back actually is trying to rotate a little on me. That's interesting. Now, I drove the Golf R at an ice track a couple months ago. Impressed with that car, but I'm eager to try it out on these dry conditions, and the GTI is amazing considering how it's down 80 horsepower to the Golf R. And that was my final second lap in the DSG equipped model. I'm gonna actually take this thing out in the manual on the track again, and we're gonna also go to an autocross course. But basically, we're gonna be testing out this Mark 8 GTI in all these different conditions with the transmissions, with the two transmission options, and VW also has a Mark 7 GTI, so I can kind of compare the dynamics because they are very, very proud of the upgraded chassis tuning and power that they've given this new version. So I kind of did this backwards. I actually drove the Mark 8 first, and now I'm in the Mark 7 GTI. Dual clutch model as well. This is down 13 horsepower, remember, compared to the Mark 8. So let's just briefly compare the two vehicles on the same track, same driver, same conditions. Now, the Mark 7 GTI was already a really good car. For a front-wheel drive hot hatch, this was Volkswagen's best-selling generation. I'm noticing right away on the straight here, it doesn't feel like it pulls quite as hard as the Mark 8. I got up to over 100 on the Mark 8 here. I only got up to about 93 in this car. The steering also is definitely lighter. Way more understeer in this one. But you know what? The noise sounds pretty similar. So it seems like Volkswagen actually did address the noise issue in the later generations of the Mark, or in the later years of the Mark 7. The chassis just doesn't want to play quite as aggressively. You feel that the car understeers a lot more. You feel that the steering doesn't talk to you quite as much. The adaptive dampers in the new one also feel like the suspension get a tad stiffer. And overall, it's still a really good car. Like, this is still one of the best handling front-wheel drive hot hatches you can buy. Although Honda might argue otherwise with the Type R, but if you guys want an automatic, a dual clutch, this is one of the better ones. And it amazes me, this is still a lot of fun. So much understeer there where the Mark 8 did not have that understeer. Foot is to the floor here. Again, just 93 miles an hour. I can't get up to the 103 that I got up to in the Mark 8. So clearly, VW has made some improvements. Ooh. The understeer is horrible there. Holy So yeah, Mark 7 GTI. Still a lot of fun on the track, but clearly there was room for improvement. So let me hop into the manual version of the Mark 8 and let's see how the stick shift model fares out on this track. All right, so now we've switched over to the manual transmission model. This is the one that enthusiasts have been really excited for, of course. And the transmission feels good right off the bat. It feels just like the old Mark 7 GTI. And the one thing I don't like about this car immediately is I keep hitting the heated steering wheel on button because it's right where I would have my hand when I'm trying to drive this thing aggressively. Now obviously the automatic is going to be easier out on the track, but this is the one that's definitely more engaging. Ooh. Nice. The one thing it doesn't have, surprisingly, is no rev matching. I thought it would have rev matching, but so much more grip around this sharp corner versus the Mark 7. It's amazing to me. Downshift rev matching would have been nice for Volkswagen to add, but this is still a lot of fun. And for those of you who'd rather rev match on your own, you're gonna appreciate that, obviously. This vehicle still very much feels like a driver's car. God, it's been a while since I drove a manual car out on a track like this. But man, this thing just rotates very little understeer compared to the Mark 7. Now, I will say that the tires are fatter in this new Mark 8. They are 235 width tires, and these are summer Bridgestones. They're sticky, man. There's so little understeer in this car, it amazes me. Even if you go in a little too hot, it still will turn in way more than I thought it would. I will say the tack is really hard to see where the red line is. I got up to 100 in this straight. I couldn't even get to 93 in the Mark 7, so that's just very impressive to me. Even right here, I'm going in too hot, and this thing just grips and grips. There's a little bit of understeer expected for a front drive car, but man, I'm super impressed with this Mark 8. It is a great track car right off the bat. And it started to rotate there on me. I went a little too hot. I have the stability control in its sport setting, so it lets the tail step out a little bit. It lets you have some fun before the nannies kick in to save your ass. The turn-in is just so immediate and direct. Like, this is such a big improvement over the Mark 7. It's just amazing to me. And third gear is very versatile. You can pretty much use it for most of this track. Like, I don't have to go to second here. I could. It would have given me a little more torque. Into fourth here, hard on the brakes. The brakes are the same brakes as the Mark 6 or Mark 7, but they feel good in this car. And as I put my foot hard here, you can feel that limited slip differential trying to sort the power out. It's not a mechanical one, it's still electronic, but it does a really good job. What a car. What an impressive front drive car right off the bat, and it loves to rotate. That is so fun when a front drive car will do that. So after spending the day driving the new GTI out on the track, it's pretty obvious that VW really wanted to focus on handling dynamics. They wanted to refine this car and make it even grippier versus the Mark 7, and I think they definitely achieved that. This vehicle has so much more grip versus the Mark 7. It's all going to come down to the way the chassis is tuned, to the way the suspension is tuned, to the way the stability control, the way the adaptive suspension system has been tuned. VW offers like 15 different ways that you can adjust that, which I think is really cool. Add in the fact that you have 10mm wider tires, the right Bridgestone tires, and I was getting around 2 seconds faster in the autocross course versus in the Mark 8 versus the Mark 7. And out on the track, I could easily catch up to a Mark 7 and have a Mark 8 on my tail when I was driving the Mark 7. So this car is a seriously more capable track car, yet it also maintains its composure out on the roads because VW, of course, has that adaptive suspension. If you guys go for the higher trims, I suspect it's going to be on the Autobahns. This is still very much going to be the ultimate daily driver, but if you guys plan to take this out to the track more often, the GTI is even more capable, whereas the old Mark 7 tended to understeer a lot more. It didn't have quite as much grip. This is very much on Civic Type R levels, or at least coming close to it. So I'm really impressed with what Volkswagen has done, and I'm very much looking forward to getting my hands on the US spec car. Now, speaking of which, if you guys are looking to buy the GTI in the US, the 2022 model doesn't go on sale until the end of the year. VW is saying November. Production should start this fall, and they haven't announced pricing just yet. The old one was just around $28,000, $29,000. This one should be right around there. Fully loaded versions could probably easily touch $38,000, which does make the GTI more expensive than its competitors. However, VWs have always been a little bit more premium. This has all that new tech features. The interior doesn't feel quite as luxurious, but if you guys like the understated look, you want something that's more track capable, you want something that's even quicker, this one should easily make it to the very top of your list. But with all that said, I hope you guys have enjoyed my full overview on the 2022 Volkswagen GTI here at the track at the M1 Concourse. If you're also looking to see the latest cars I'm testing, be sure to follow me on Instagram at redline_reviews, like us on Facebook, and as always, guys, please keep subscribing to the Redline Reviews YouTube channel for all the latest reviews. Thank you so much for watching. I'll catch you all in the next video.